A woman doesn't belong on the battlefield. She shouldn't be giving orders to men. If she's strong, she must be cold. If she's wise, she must be alone. We've heard it all before. From ancient scrolls to modern headlines, the world has a way of underestimating a woman who knows her purpose. Hey there, family. Before we begin, I just want to say, I hope you and your loved ones are well, grounded, and surrounded by peace. Now let me ask you something. What happens when God doesn't just call a woman, but places a nation's future in her hands? This isn't fiction. This is the true story of Deborah, a prophetess, a judge, a warrior, and the kind of leader whose courage rewrote history. If you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe to Women in the Bible, where forgotten heroines get their spotlight back. Now, let me take you back to a time when men ruled the tribes, kings rode on chariots of iron, and no one expected a woman to lead an army. But that's exactly what she did. The land of Israel was fractured, not by earthquakes, not by famine, but by fear. It had been years, 20 long years, since the people of Israel had known peace. And in that time, the cries of mothers, the silence of defeated fathers, and the curses of the oppressed filled the air like a never-ending storm. They were being crushed, not by swords alone, but by the weight of their own disobedience. The Lord had delivered them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, a ruler with no mercy, no compassion, and no regard for the God of Israel. And leading Jabin's forces was Sisera, a man with 900 iron chariots and a reputation for bloodshed. The roads were empty, villages lay in silence. The people of Israel no longer walked upright. They crawled through life in fear. What would you do if your government failed, your army was silent, and your prayers seemed unanswered? Would you wait for a man to rise, or would you listen for the voice of God, even if it came through a woman? Now listen. In the hill country of Ephraim, beneath a palm tree that bore her name, sat a woman unlike any other. Her name was Deborah. She wasn't born with a crown. She didn't inherit her seat. She didn't hold a sword, yet kings bowed to her wisdom. She was a prophetess, one who heard God's voice clearer than the roar of battle. But more than that, she was a judge, chosen to settle disputes, to speak truth, to lead in chaos when men remained silent. Every day, people would come from all over. Men with property feuds, widows demanding justice, soldiers seeking guidance, and they would sit beneath that tree while Deborah listened. She didn't speak quickly. She didn't need to raise her voice, because when God speaks through you, the world learns to listen. Have you ever met someone whose quiet confidence made the loudest noise in the room? Drop a 2 below if someone just came to mind. Deborah stood alone under the swaying branches of her palm tree, her eyes fixed on the horizon. And then she spoke. Call for Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali. Messengers rode out swiftly. They didn't question her. They knew. When Deborah called, it was because God had spoken. Soon after, Barak arrived, cloaked in dust and uncertainty. A skilled warrior, yes. A capable leader, yes. But today, he didn't look like either. His eyes scanned the crowd gathered beneath the tree. And then Deborah delivered a message that no man expected to hear from the mouth of a woman. The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go. Take 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun and lead them to Mount Tabor. I will lure Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and troops to the Kishon River, and I will give him into your hands. Silence. Barak's lips tightened, his jaw clenched. He believed in God. But could he believe in victory when the odds were iron and blood and wheels that crushed bones into dust? And then he said something that would be remembered forever. If you go with me, I will go. But if you do not go with me, I won't go. The crowd murmured. Some scoffed, some stared. A man asking a woman to lead him into battle? But Deborah didn't flinch. Her voice, steady, unapologetic. "Very well, I will go with you, but because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours. For the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." Pause for a moment. Can you feel the weight of those words? A military commander hesitates. A prophetess steps up, and the future of a nation hangs in the balance. Would you have gone into battle if victory meant losing your legacy? Barak accepted the charge. 10,000 men were summoned from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun. They marched to Mount Tabor, rising like a sentinel above the plains. And Deborah? She was right there, not behind them, not in the safety of the hills, but beside them in the tension, in the fear, in the rising wind that carried the scent of war. And war was coming. The valley below Mount Tabor lay still, too still. Far off in the distance, the glint of metal moved like a river of knives. Sisera was coming, riding at the head of his iron army, his 900 chariots cutting across the plain like thunder made flesh. Behind him were soldiers hardened by cruelty, sharpened by war. And ahead of him, a ragtag force of Israelites, barely armed, led by a hesitant commander and a woman. What would go through your mind if you stood facing an army 10 times your size, with no armor and only your faith? Deborah watched the enemy descend like a wave. Then she turned to Barak and shouted words that shook the mountain. "Go! This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" And just like that, Barak moved. He led 10,000 men crashing down from the slopes of Tabor like a tidal wave of fury. But then, heaven itself joined the fight. The skies darkened. Thunder rolled across the valley. Rain poured in sheets, so fierce, so sudden, it was unnatural. The very ground beneath Sisera's chariots turned to mud. Iron wheels locked. Horses screamed. Warriors fell. Sisera's advantage, his steel, his speed, was now his curse. The chariots were useless. His soldiers scattered in the downpour. The Lord didn't just give Barak strength, he sent a storm. It wasn't just a battle, it was a divine takedown. One by one, Sisera's army fell under the swords of men who had once been afraid to stand. But Sisera fled. The mighty commander who crushed nations, he ran, on foot, alone. Let that sink in. The man with 900 chariots ran for his life, while the woman he mocked stood tall under heaven's roar. Drop a 1 in the comments if you believe God still fights unseen battles on our behalf. As the battlefield emptied, Barak stood among the fallen, soaked in rain, panting, eyes wide at what just happened. But Deborah? She wasn't surprised. She had seen it before it began. Because when you walk with God, you don't just predict the victory, you declare it. The storm had passed, but Sisera, once the most feared commander in Canaan, was now nothing more than a fugitive. His armor was gone. His soldiers were gone. His pride was bleeding into the mud beneath his feet. He ran not toward his fortress or his king, but into the wilderness, alone, desperate, trembling like a hunted animal. Ahead, a tent appeared, a small one, ordinary, quiet. It belonged to Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Her people were nomads, iron workers and traders, not warriors. But they had long been at peace with King Jabin, Sisera's master. Her husband Heber had even moved away from the other Kenites to stay out of the conflict. Sisera thought he had found safety. He stumbled toward the tent, breathless, caked in dirt. Jael stepped outside. She saw the blood on his hands, the fear in his eyes. But her expression did not change. "My lady," Sisera said, his voice hoarse, his confidence shattered. "Let me hide. Give me water. They're coming." Jael offered him shelter. She covered him with a blanket and gave him milk instead of water. Warm, calming, disarming. The kind of hospitality no soldier expects in wartime. "Stand at the entrance," he said. "If anyone comes, tell them I'm not here. Then he collapsed, exhausted, believing he was safe in the tent of a woman. But Jael knew something Sisera didn't. She knew which side justice stood on, and she knew that when evil seeks comfort, silence is complicity. While Sisera slept, Jael quietly picked up a tent peg in one hand and a hammer in the other. This was not an act of impulse. It was an act of war, an act of clarity, an act of righteous rebellion. She approached silently, one step, then another. She stood over the man whose hands had spilled innocent blood, and with one precise blow, it was done. Sisera, the terror of Israel, was dead, not by the hand of a king, nor the sword of a warrior, but by the resolve of a woman with no title, an unshakable conviction. Later, Barak arrived, still searching for the man he had chased through storm and slaughter, and Jael stepped out to meet him. "Come," she said, "I will show you the man you are looking for." He followed her into the tent, and there lay Sisera, lifeless, the final symbol of oppression, fallen by a woman's hand. Do you see the pattern? Deborah gave the command. Barak led the charge. But in the end, it was a woman, unexpected, uncelebrated, who delivered the final blow. Not because she sought glory, but because she understood something many still don't. Sometimes justice comes in soft steps, and it doesn't ask permission. Now ask yourself this: if you were Jael, would you have acted? Or would you have hidden, afraid, hoping someone else would rise? The dust of battle had settled. Bodies had been buried. Weapons had been cleaned. But the echo of what had happened, how it had happened, was far from over. In Israel, when the people were saved, they didn't write history books. They sang, and so did Deborah. She and Barak, now united not just by war, but by witness, lifted their voices in what would become one of the most powerful songs in Scripture. Not a ballad of blood, but a song of truth. They sang not to glorify themselves, but to name what had been forgotten. That when leaders lead with courage and people follow with conviction, God moves. Listen, O kings, give ear, O princes, she began. I, even I, will sing to the Lord. Her words painted the battlefield as it truly was. Not just earth and metal, but a stage where the heavens fought, where mountains trembled, where rain became a weapon, where the river Kishon swept enemies away like dust. She called out the tribes, some who rose to fight, and others who stayed in their boats, in their homes, in their comfort. And she didn't hold back. Why did you stay among the sheep pens, to hear the whistling for the flocks? It wasn't just praise, it was accountability. And then she named Jael. Most blessed of women be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Blessed is she among women in tents. This was unheard of. A tent-dwelling woman lifted higher than queens? Yes, because history does not belong to palaces. It belongs to those who act when others freeze. The song ended with a vision. May all your enemies perish, O Lord, but may those who love you be like the sun when it rises in its strength. With that, Deborah's legacy was sealed, not only as a judge or prophetess, but as a poet, a seer, a voice that gave shape to justice. And the land? It rested for 40 years. 40 years of peace, bought not by brute strength, but by obedience, prophetic fire, and the hands of women who refused to be silent. Now pause. What does it say to us today? In a world that still questions the strength of women, that still doubts their ability to lead, to judge, to fight, what does it mean that one of the greatest military victories in Israel's history was orchestrated not by generals, but by a prophetess, a reluctant warrior, and a woman with a tent peg? What does it mean for your voice, your calling, your courage? What if Deborah had stayed quiet? What if Jael had turned her back? And more importantly, what if the next Deborah is you? Let's bring it home. Women today lead nations, command courtrooms, march into boardrooms and battlefields. But for every Deborah we see, there are 1,000 we don't. Voices silenced, courage buried under expectation. So here's the question. If Deborah were alive today, would the world let her lead? And more importantly, would you follow her? Tell us in the comments. Thank you for watching this episode of Women in the Bible. If this story moved you, if it made you see power in a different light, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share your thoughts below. And remember, leadership doesn't always look like a crown. Sometimes it looks like a woman sitting under a tree, listening. History remembers warriors in armor, kings with crowns, men who spoke loudly and carried heavy swords. But Deborah carried no sword. She wore no crown. And yet, her name has echoed through thousands of years, because when everyone else stayed quiet, she stood. She stood in a time when no one expected leadership from a woman. She judged fairly. She prophesied boldly. She led an army without lifting a weapon, and she changed the future of a nation simply by saying yes to God. Now look around you. We live in a world where women can be CEOs, presidents, professors, and preachers. And yet so many are still told, "You're too emotional. You're not strong enough. Let a man handle it." Sound familiar? That's why Deborah matters now more than ever. Because she didn't just break barriers, she erased the map and redrew it with her own hands. She showed us that spiritual authority has no gender, that courage is not masculine, and that justice is not reserved for the powerful, it is reserved for the obedient. So here's the real question. What would happen if we stopped waiting for permission and started walking like Deborah? What if today's Deborah isn't in the palace, but behind the counter of a shop, in a classroom, on a factory floor, or raising children in a world that doesn't always value them? What if she's been silent because no one ever told her she was born to lead, and maybe, just maybe, that Deborah is you? You don't need a platform. You don't need a title. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to say yes, because history isn't waiting for a perfect woman. It's waiting for a willing one. So now we ask you, if you could speak like Deborah, would you? If you could lead like Deborah, would you? If you were called like Deborah, would you answer? Let us know in the comments. This has been Deborah, the woman the world didn't expect, but heaven chose. Thank you for watching this full story on Women in the Bible. If it inspired you, challenged you, or made you rethink the limits society puts on women, please like the video, share it, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this one. And don't forget, the next story could be yours.